Hey, welcome, friends. Welcome to another edition of Pup Theology online. We've been meeting for a few years now. Before, we used to meet at the friendly spot Ice House, and now we are meeting online during this time together through this pandemic. And so we are excited to do our annual DreamWeek Pup Theology event alongside Black Freedom Factory and Planned Parenthood of South Texas and some other great organizations that have come together. And we had to move this event online. We were going to go to Hopscotch San Antonio, just right across the street from Travis Park Church. But you're here tonight online, and we're glad you're with us, especially in this cold weather where everybody's warm and safe. And we're coming live to you from our studio at Travis Park Church in downtown San Antonio. And it's a sacred space because right now, we're not the only thing happening in this building. 2 stories below us, we're sleeping around 50 people who are unhoused. Who are getting a warm meal right now, who have a cot and some blankets. And for the next few nights, they're going to be safe from the elements. And so this building is full of life and full of love. And we're glad you can join us for this Dream Week event. Dream Week's happening all over San Antonio for about a 2-week span, centering around MLK Day, which we just celebrated this past Monday. And it's just supposed to lift up the dream, but not the dream that's easy. The dream that's easy is the palatable MLK dream. The dream we want to talk about are the dream that he can remind us that fighting for social justice is hard, and it's demanding, and it takes work. Right before MLK was assassinated, he was doing the hard work, speaking on behalf of sanitation workers and fighting for the poor, even when it was unpopular amongst many different viewpoints. And so that's the dream that I think Dream Week is about. The Dream Week that is going to be that we go deep and we talk about real issues. And the one person I always trust to talk about this is one of my good friends in here in San Antonio, and that's Camilla Factory, who's going to be hosting this amazing panel for me. I'm going to get off and let her take over because she is the reason why we're having it tonight, and she'll introduce our panel and our wonderful guests that will be with us. So welcome to Pup Theology. Grab a drink, grab something to eat. I wish we could be here in person. What you can do is if you have any questions from your panel, and we'll remind you of this throughout the program, if you go on watching on YouTube or Facebook to any of the official partners pages, if you type in a question, we will see that and we can pull it up and have that discussion with you. So be interactive, ask questions, state your statements, and we will get with you and make this as inclusive as possible. So with no further ado, here's one of my good friends in San Antonio, Camilla Factory.
Hello, San Antonio. Welcome to Black Freedom Factory's Dream Week event. It is our very first Dream Week event. We are so happy that you are joining us to talk about Afrofuturism, the complexities and the beauty that beholds the Black community. But before I get into the panel that we have tonight with our amazing panelists, I want to give credit and credence to the land that we occupy. And I would like to welcome Laura Ramirez to come and bless this land for us and bless this space and honor our ancestors.
Wali Yowali relatives, my name is Laura Rios Ramirez Yowaltlawis of Calpulia Yolopaxin. We are a group of intertribal families residing here on the occupied territories of Somisec in Yanaguana, which is occupied San Antonio. And just want to open up by honoring the Eshtokna, the Carrizo Come Crudo, Coahuilteca people, Tankawa people, the displaced tribes like the Lipan, like the Apache people, who have all resided in this territory that we now know as Texas. And of course, all of the indigenous people that have migrated throughout thousands of years on these territories and have had intertribal kinships throughout thousands of years, and our Black indigenous people that have worked and have offered their blood, sweat, and tears on this land. We honor the directions. I'm a keeper of the traditions of the Toltecayot, Mexicayot, Anahuaca, which is the continent that we currently know as the Americas or Turtle Island. So I'm opening up with the flute song this evening. ask permission of the eastern direction, the direction of wisdom and knowledge, the house of Quetzalcoatl, the house of the rising sun. And we ask permission of the western direction, of the female warriors, of those who died giving birth, and all those femme and maternal spirits that occupy and walk these lands, that have made a way for us through birthing us, through their ideas, through their bodies. We ask permission of those to the northern direction, the place of our ancestors, the place where all of the souls and the spirits of those that we have lost to COVID-19 and to various other various different causes of oppression and violence, like police violence. We ask that they grant us permission to be here in a good way. We ask permission of the southern direction, the direction of the children, of the warriors, of all of those masculine spirits that walk these lands and give us their strength and that initiative and that willpower to keep going. We ask permission of the cosmos, of all that resides in the universe and all that resides out in the essence of creation, the ethers of creation. And we ask permission of Mother Earth, our home place, that where we will return when we leave this plane and we offer our lives and our bodies to her. We ask permission of each other to be here in a good place and a good way, to manifest our future in the now, to be able to carry our face, in our face, the essence of our hearts. Ometeo, tlasokamati.
Ometeo, thank you so much, Laura, for that beautiful acknowledgement of the land that we occupy. Laura was going to create a soundscape immersion experience. This program was going to be in person, but due to the rise in cases that we've seen of COVID-19, we found it negligent to have an in-person aspect of this event and have postponed all future aspects of this event to April. So the fun will continue today, virtually as well as in person at Hopscotch Museum in April. Please be on the lookout for that, where we will have a Bands Off Our Bodies fashion show featuring the youth from Circles in the Hood, which is a youth development curriculum and program that Black Freedom Factory and De Corazon Circles have come together and cultivated in order to help the youth identify trauma and healing that trauma. So thank you, Laura, for your vision. Thank you for standing in solidarity with me for Black lives. And thank you for helping me understand and identify Black indigeneity and all of its complexities and intersections. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce our panelists for tonight and get into the nitty-gritty of this discussion. A little backstory on Afrofuturism. So Afrofuturism is a philosophy that Black Freedom Factory roots in all of our programs and all of our community building. And so Afrofuturism is a thought and philosophy that believes in the future and freedom of Black communities. And what that looks like is learning from the past in order to deal with the present and make pathways for the future. Afrofuturism is a philosophy where Black communities can find ourselves thriving, liberated, and professional. So I was really excited to cultivate this conversation virtually and give this space to everyone in their living rooms or in their homes, in the safety of their homes during this time of COVID, an opportunity to learn from professionals in our very own city and backyard of San Antonio, Texas, who are cultivating and changing lives every day nationally across the board with their contribution as Black professionals. So tonight we have three panelists. We have Pastor Naomi Brown, attorney William Simmons, as well as Councilman Jalen McKee Rodriguez. Unfortunately, before we get started, I must make an announcement that Councilman Jalen McKee Rodriguez is not able to join us. He is currently battling COVID-19, so we send our prayers and our love to Councilman, and we hope that he can be rejuvenated to join this conversation with us in the future. But we know that he has Afrofuturist principles and ideologies in the work that he cultivates on the dais. We've seen his advocacy, and we love him from wherever he is at watching. So thank you so much, Councilman Jalen McKee Rodriguez. But I'll go ahead and start off with his bio. So Jalen McKee Rodriguez is an educator who is committed to serving and empowering the community through representative policymaking. As the son of 2 veterans and the oldest of 3 children, he was raised to value service to others, empathy, and integrity. 2 years after graduating from the University of Texas at San Antonio with a Bachelor's of Arts in Communication, Jalen decided to continue living by family principles by working at Sam Houston High School as a high school math teacher. Through working closely with students and families in District 2, it became clear how heavily the environment impacts a child's future, how their housing, access to transportation, and access to recreational activities play a huge role in these critical years of their lives. These observations are what inspired Jalen to run and make a difference for representation, and it's key for good policy. Listening to what is necessary for good representation, which will be done on the dais and in the city for District 2. Councilmember Jalen McKee Rodriguez was elected to serve District 2 on June 5th, 2021, and began his term on June 15th, 2021. Thank you, Jalen, for representing the people, and thank you for all that you've done on the dais already. It is my pleasure to announce our next panelist, Pastor Naomi Brown, pronouns she, they. She is a licensed master level social worker with over 20 years of experience in social services. Naomi started their education at City College in New York, later completing their master's degree at Our Lady of the Lake University in social work with a concentration in children and families and a minor in administration. In her current position at Haven for Hope, Naomi serves as the professional development and training manager for a program that did not exist 18 months ago. With over 200 employees, Naomi sees clients as a trauma therapist in conjunction with her position as clinical training manager. Naomi serves on the board of NASW Texas and is the board member for Region 8 Alamo area, representing over 600 social workers and 3 schools of social work. Naomi is a field instructor with UTSA, Army FSU, OLLU, and Texas State. She values mentoring and challenging the next generation of social workers. Naomi also works as an adjunct professor at Our Lady of the Lake University, teaching integrative seminar connecting theory for practice for graduating BSW students. And for the past 7 years, she has been a safe zone trainer and teaches LGBT sensitivity. Thank you so much for joining us today, Naomi. We are really excited to get into this conversation with you.
Well, thank you so much for this. That introduction, and obviously it's an older one, but I am still the person that we are talking about. I just do a different job now. I'm actually clinical director at the Pride Center, so I'm actually working with folks who identify as queer and LGBTQ and trans, and I do work with trauma-informed care and really touching folks where they are. So that is where my passion is. I'm also the outreach minister at Metropolitan Community Church. And since we don't have a pastor right now, that's probably been my primary job since January 1st. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And the Pride Center, I personally benefit from the services that they provide for LGBTQIA youth. So I am very grateful for your work. So our next panelist is attorney William Simmons. He is an experienced owner with a demonstrated history of working in the legal services industry. He is a skilled in marketing sport, criminal defense, criminal law, classroom instruction in law, a strong business development professional with a doctor of law, JD focused in law from Texas Southern University. He also was an attorney and my mentor that I could look up to when I was a baby in undergrad, and I was able to shadow him and his various amazing defenses in the courtroom. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Attorney Simmons.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
All right. Well, I'm really, really excited to get into this conversation about Afrofuturism and what that looks like for the future of Black communities, what that looks like for the future of our community in San Antonio. Both of you are innovating and changing the landscape and everything that you do, every breath that you take, every life that you touch, including mine. So I'm really excited to hear the insight that you give about the questions that I have prepared for you tonight. So the first question is, Afrofuturist philosophy credits its founding principles that lived in the minds of our ancestors who imagined a future where Black communities are liberated and free. How can we incorporate Afrofuturist principles into the policy, law, and social relations of building Black power in San Antonio? And how can we sustain it? And Naomi, how do you feel about this first question?
So for me, it's really crucial to realize, I laugh because I tell folks Jesus was a social justice minister. His conversations, there are over 2,000 social justice verses in the Bible. As a therapist, I step into that space saying, if we do not create strong and powerful youth who are able to know their history, who are able to talk about their history, and who are able to take from that the fact of what our ancestors gave us, we actually have to change policy. It is so crucially important for us to realize that our power lies not in just speaking it, but actually living it and working it, and actually going out there and making sure that we are voting, and that we are voting for the people who should be in office, and that we're putting our money where it belongs and checking where our money goes so that we're not supporting someone who does not support us. So for me, that is a crucial part of how we move forward.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Our right to vote is the autonomy of the political freedom that we have in the future of democracy. And so I 100% agree. How about you, Attorney Simmons? How do you feel about this question? What can we do to incorporate Afrofuturist principles into policy, law, and social relations of building Black power in San Antonio? And what does sustaining that look like, especially in the courtroom?
Thank you for the question. I think it looks a lot like Camilla Factory. It looks a lot like the work that Dr. Pastor Shea is doing. I think ultimately speaking, it just hit me as you were doing the introductions that the councilman, and we wish him, hope that he gets better soon, that he had a veteran presence in his life. It seems he's had some veteran and military stuff within her background. My lineage with the United States Army goes all the way back to the colored troops back during the Civil War. So when I think about a continued vision, I always think about my great, 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 great uncle Arthur and why it is he would risk his life to escape from a plantation, make his way to Kentucky and fight for the freedoms that we're enjoying today. And how does that tie in? I think it ties in with, I think we need to continue to, when we, just like what the pastor was just saying, when we see those times where it's time to escape, we need to maintain our ancestral spirit of escape and be willing to fight for those things that matter. In terms of, you asked specifically about the courts, it's all about representation. So I've got a boring answer to that, and it is we just need as many people of color going to school with an interest in law, graduating law school, and getting their law degrees. Representation is very, very important. I mean, I've had to discuss those things with you in the past about how there's different perspectives on different situations that simply don't yield themselves to the majority view at times. And so folks just keep studying, keep living, keep having children, and keep being the beautiful folks that we are.
Thank you so much for that insight, Attorney Simmons and Naomi. I 100% agree. And you two were the people that came to mind when I think about the Black voices that are uplifting and liberating community constantly, especially myself as a young professional looking forward to the future and what that looks like, the landscape for me. So I appreciate that. So I think we can get into question number 2, which is rooted in some data that my team and I dug up over the past week when we were thinking about and cultivating these questions. And that is, according to the analysis by the Center for Talent Innovation, a workplace think tank in New York City, Black people account for about 12% of the US population, but occupy only 3.2% of the senior leadership roles at large companies in the United States, and just about 0.8% of all Fortune 500 CEO positions. Being Black professionals, how do you already imagine Afrofutures in your everyday professional careers, especially with these percentages that we just gave, which are very reflective of a marginalization of our communities and professionals being depicted in that?
So I think one of the things which I'm certainly going to jump on and agree with, education is so much the key. You know, we come from a rich ancestral background, and I was raised by a single mother who went on to get 3 college degrees, so she instilled in me that view that this is what the future looks like. Now, the reason that we have such a small percentage when it comes to those positions, and a lot of it is nepotism. When we think about it, you know, my dad was not the head of Pepsi, so he could not make me CEO of Pepsi. But if I create something that is great and I lift my family up and I lift up those around me, then I'm adding to that uprising. I'm adding to that situation where we need to reach down and pick up the person so they're standing beside us, because we're stronger when we're trying to climb that ladder together. You know, I also have a certification in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I look at these as buzzwords now because we're all saying, wow, this is what we need to do. But are we talking the talk and walking the walk? Are you going within your own community and lifting people up? Are you promoting from within? Are we bringing up that young, are we mentoring the next generation and saying, darling, you can also be a CEO. You just need a CEO to show you what it looks like. So I think for us, a lot of it comes down to making sure that we are bringing up that next generation, that we are allowing them to know that, you know what, stand on my back if you need to, because that'll get you a little higher.
Mm. Absolutely. Attorney Simmons?
Attorney Simmons?
I couldn't say it any better, Pastor Naomi. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a lot of times people want to refer to the United States as a meritocracy. But when you really dig into the concept of meritocracy, just like what Pastor Naomi was saying, nepotism flies in the face of meritocracy. Being able to, and I've got nothing against student athletes, but being able to dribble or being able to throw a football, getting you into the University of Texas at Austin, while I have mentees that are applying and they're not going to get it, that flies in the face of meritocracy. But it doesn't fly in the face of the American way. And so it's important, visuals matter. And when you have somebody that cares about you, that's willing to show you what a CEO looks like, what a law firm looks like, what it is to go to court. I hate to put you on the spot, but I know there was times where you were shadowing me. And I think that when we were able to go to the courthouse and you were able to go behind the scenes and meet some of the judges, I think you saw that they're just human beings just like you are. And it's one of the things that can motivate you to continue on. But ultimately speaking, it's incumbent upon us that are here to reach back and not just help, but sometimes inconvenience ourselves to help. Because there's going to come a time where even in the law, for me personally, it'll be a time where I'm not doing this anymore. And I'm going to need some help. And the help that you receive is pretty much going to be the help that you've given. And so moving forward, I think that mentorship is the most important. But I'd also speak to the idea of I'm not one of these people that's going to get on the youth, the folks, the creative types. Ultimately speaking, we do need to promote and support that 19-year-old who comes in and says that they want to start their own clothing line. If they're willing to work to do that, we need to help them, because a lot of these, at the end of the day, we don't own these companies, and that's the main reason a lot of folks like us you don't see us moving up within those companies to the highest levels. It's a good thing to work for Pepsi. It's a good thing to work at UPS. It's a good thing to work at these companies, but I would hope that we maintain our understanding of the necessity of entrepreneurialism, and that we are building up our own companies. Because ultimately speaking, you want to see more Black CEOs, you want to see more CEOs of color, you need to see more Black-owned businesses, bottom line.
Yes, pertaining to what you had spoken about recently about me shadowing you, I remember one time you had brought me into Judge Rosie Gonzalez's courtroom, and I remembered being in awe. I was a baby gay. I was like, oh my gosh, there was this beautiful pride flag as tall as the American flag in that courtroom. And I remembered she sat me right next to her. And I remembered like them turning to me, like pausing the actual session in court and saying, do you understand what's going on here? And I felt so special. I felt so important. I felt so validated. And I remember that to this day. And so I 100% thank you for taking me under your wing. Oh, we have been through some times. Attorney Simmons and I mean, bringing pizza for lunch. There's just a plethora of conversations and experiences that I've had, and I appreciate you for opening that door for me and all of the connections that I have cultivated and maintained after that. So the third question that I have for the both of you, and everybody in the comment section or anybody watching, please feel free to engage and ask our panelists some questions. They are really giving us valuable time tonight, and we're really grateful for their experiences. So the third question is, additionally, according to a study by the Center for Talent Innovation in December 2019, companies are spending millions of dollars trying to diversify their staff and are not succeeding. Why do you believe that their efforts are not succeeding? And why is it important to pass the professional baton to the Black community? And I think that you all have touched on this in your previous answers, but why do you think, and by the way, just to date this research that we've done, it's 2019. So this is pre-George Floyd era, right? This is the Black Lives Matter movement was alive, but it was reignited after this data came out. And I would say that people are still trying to diversify their staff and teams, and I would like to see what those numbers look like. We couldn't find any recent numbers from that. So why do you think that these efforts aren't succeeding, Pastor Naomi?
So one of the things I think becomes a challenge is, where are you looking for people at? Are you looking within your own organizations? Because there are probably folks in that organization who could be promoted, but you're too busy looking outside of what's right in front of you. And I think when it comes to inclusion and diversifying the workforce, a lot of it depends on how we develop people from the beginning. Are we developing people who know that they can do this? You know, the American workforce is one that does not openly support you having a work-life balance. We live with presentism, you know, we go to work sick. You know, so it's not something that makes you want to pour your energy and you work till you die. But are you actually offering folks an opportunity to live their whole lives and also be fully engaged? So are we starting at the high school level? Are we starting in recognizing the value of trades? Are we starting and recognizing the value that if you are so in debt with student loan, then you don't have an opportunity to really work your way up in an organization. You have to take a job for money. Are you doing something that you love? So where are we looking for these people at? Are we going into our historically Black colleges and recruiting? There are people out there to fill these positions. I just think we're looking in the wrong spaces, in the wrong places. Think of sacred spaces. You often will find folks in sacred spaces that could be your CEO, but are you recruiting in the right spot?
It's a wonderful reflection. Thank you, Pastor Naomi. Attorney Simmons, how do you feel? Why do you believe that their efforts are not succeeding?
Let's just, again, if we cut straight to the chase, in this country of 335 million people, fundamentally, if there's an issue of you wanting to diversify and saying that you can't do that, it's just about that it simply hasn't been prioritized enough. There's too much hesitancy. The people are there. You just have to make that decision. And I think that decision it's vacillated by a true belief in the value of diversity and diverse opinions. It's one of the reasons at my firm that no matter what, I'm going to always keep somebody on staff between the ages of around 20 to 22. I like to stay up. What does that do for me? I've prioritized having that because, one, social media, I do some family law as well. First thing I do is put my younger employees on what I call a social media scrape. You'd be shocked at what's out there and what can come up in the midst of a divorce or a family law matter. They understand those things. In other words, I personally prioritize and value having young people at a law firm, and not necessarily folks that have to be paralegals or all of these kind of things. There's different ways that people can contribute. And so if you're sitting there and, if you sell mops and you're sitting in a boardroom and there's nobody and there's no people of color or anybody there, okay, it needs to be a priority of yours, because the bottom line is that in 2022 and moving forward, we know where the census number, your business is going to suffer. So I just fundamentally don't buy into the idea of anybody saying that they can't find qualified candidates. They're not, the people who are emphasizing diversity, okay, are emphasizing diversity, and they're better for it. And so that's my approach to that. My approach to it's the same way with my firm. I try to have people as diverse as possible. So we try to blacks, whites, Hispanics, obviously, Latinos, LGBTQ, but I know it because it enhances my business. And I personally just can't think of a business that's not enhanced by diversity. Accordingly, I'm basically speaking to the idea there's just some folks who don't want to diversify in certain areas, and those areas need to be addressed.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with both of your answers. And before we get to the question that we have in the comments, I also want to reflect on, identifying as a queer woman, a queer Black woman, and seeing, rainbow capitalism be more prominent, especially in the month of Pride, seeing companies and corporations that love to slap a rainbow in their marketing and on their branding, but don't uphold those principles when hiring LGBTQIA plus employees or staff, and don't uphold that in their policies and procedures and protecting that staff once they're hired. So that's a specific example that I can think of pertaining to the intersection of my queer identity. And just how, do better. It's 2022. We have the world at our fingertips with access to technology. And as an activist, I've tried to incorporate that in my advocacy for community. I often think about what would have happened if Angela Davis or Malcolm X or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had access to Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. What would the wave, what would that have looked like at that time? And how far would the components of social justice, how far would we be up the mountain toward the path of liberation and freedom? So I'll go ahead and engage with the question that we have up from Josefina Fernandez, who is as Black Freedom Factory's community outreach coordinator. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Her question is, how can non-Black POC help with greater inclusion of more Afrofuturist spaces? How can non-Black POC help with greater inclusion of more Afrofuturist spaces?
So I'm all about allyship. And allyship is a verb. You know, if we think about it, if we think of it as an action word, we think of the fact that if you are actively engaging in raising someone up, then they become stronger by you actively being a part of it. You know, we just had Dr. King's birthday. And as I was doing a presentation for SAC, I began to talk about how allies played such a crucial role in the March on Washington, and how allies and freedom fighters came from all aspects of the world. And because when someone who is not a part of the community begins to fight for that community, in our society, it brings about a sense of normalizing it. And it makes it, you know, and I'm all about being radical. I have no problem being radical if radical is what I need to be. I also realize that sometimes I need to be able to have a conversation in a boardroom that gets through and allows you to understand what's important to the people that I am struggling and fighting for. So if you are fighting for someone who is not in your, it's not your experience, that to them allows them to be affirmed and acknowledged as someone who is worth fighting for. It is so important that we bring that experience to youth. And just to piggyback on that, you know, diversity is also not putting people out to pasture when they reach a certain age, because you're allowing that wisdom and that brilliance to get away. And we have this society that says you're either too young or too old to do it. And I believe that we get something incredible from every aspect of that.
Me for your answer. So much wisdom and just rich reflection in that response. I'm very grateful for your experience tonight on this panel. Attorney Simmons, before you weigh in on this question, I left a very important part, an aspect of your identity out, and that is the GI that accompanies the bill and the William Simmons. Thank you for serving our country. I know that my father, who is a retired veteran, told me in the concept of allyship that when he was fighting for his life in Afghanistan and Iraq and the country's life, everybody's race pretty much dissolved because they all had to survive in that moment. So reflecting on that, if you're watching and you served our country, thank you for that. What does this question mean to you? How can non-Black POC help with greater inclusion of more Afrofuturist spaces?
I would specifically say that the biggest thing is to have the capability to back up, and you don't even have to appreciate it, but be able to be tolerant of things you don't understand. There's some times where, like you just mentioned, where in the military, where, you know, when things get serious, all those things dissolve. But I could tell you, well, actually, I can do better with a story. You know, right there at the law firm here recently, okay, I'm a big supporter of a thing in California called the Crown Act, okay, and it's basically something saying that, and I don't think it gets enough attention, quite frankly, where it's not allowing people to discriminate against people based on their hair type or their texture, okay. I personally don't see the difference. I don't see what a person's hairdo has anything to do with their ability to do a job. Well, let's say you're in a space where someone has an issue with somebody with dreadlocks or takes issue with somebody with a different type of hairdo. You can back up and allow yourself. And I'm sorry, I haven't been on one of these shows where I'm just staring at myself as I speak. It just throws me off because I can't see anybody else. I can't see anybody's reactions. It's freezing me up. I'm like, really? Is you okay? You really should have shaved your nose hair this morning. What's going on? So if I can thank y'all so much. Okay. No. But the big issue is I think with Afrofuturist, because I'm gonna be real, I don't have a complete grasp of this concept of myself, but I'm willing to learn and to hear it. Camilla is a great friend. There's been plenty of concepts where she said it to me the first time, and I would say that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? But I keep that story back here. I got sense enough not to say that to Camilla. But then Camilla can explain these things and break them down into a way where that makes all the sense in the world. The key issue is me being able to pause in that first moment and be accepting of an idea that I didn't understand. And so I would think, to answer the question specifically, the first step would be for you to be able to just back up. And if it's not something that's deleterious to the overall mission at hand, whatever that is, to let people be themselves.
Yes. Thank you, Attorney Simmons. You look great, by the way. Everyone does on this. Melanin is popping. Appreciate your reflection. I 100% agree. I do always approach you with these things that I've read and some kind of literature review. And you always take kindly to the philosophies and ideas that I run across. But for people who are getting a grasp on what Afrofuturism is and what April looks like in person when we have our event at Hopscotch Museum, Afrofuturism is a movement in literature, art, and culture that incorporates Blackness and its existence in the future. Afrofuturism is also a shared ideology that reconstructs Blackness and creates a pathway for the future of Black communities and youth. It is a way of looking at the future or alternate realities through a Black cultural lens. This is reflected in the life and works of figures such as Octavia Butler, Sojourner Truth, Sun Ra, and Janelle Monáe, and others. So a lot, and also Missy Elliott, right? TLC, a lot of Black folk that have incorporated this into fashion didn't really coin the principle, but always have an existence. And Afrofuturism believes that a Black life is the future. And that we superseded that of chains and slavery, right? And that we always will. And so that's why I am embedding everything about Black Freedom Factory and my contribution to the community in Afrofuturist philosophy. So yeah, with that being said, I think we have some more questions that we are looking at. So this one is from Sophia. She says, what are some Afrofuturists whose pronouns are she, her? I know her personally. Thank you so much for contributing to our conversation tonight. Who are some Afrofuturists who have inspired you all that you would say paved the way for us to have this conversation today? And I'm sure that like a lot of people maybe haven't coined themselves Afrofuturists, but once again, who are some Black people in entertainment or politics in history that have paved the way for you to have this conversation today? I personally will go first. I'm going to say Sojourner Truth. Love her works, her writing. Ain't I a Woman is one of my favorite pieces that she wrote. And I think that like, I'll go ahead and say this on record. I think Sojourner Truth was like super butch and like androgynous and femme all at the same time. And she depicted like just a badass Black woman who wasn't going to let anybody or anything stop her. She was way ahead of her time in helping our ancestors on their pathway to freedom at that time. So who are some figures that you all give credence to in your existence today?
So for me, I tend to, being a poet, I tend to go toward my writers, Maya Angelou, Ntozake Shange, Audre Lorde. Tracy Chapman. Okay, she made nappy hair happy, and it was okay long before we knew what it looked like. So I mean, it was just the fact that all of these strong Black women brought this presence. Roberta Flack. We could go way back. We could go way back. But realizing that it was okay for me to be different. It was okay for me to be loud. I was raised by a very strong Black woman who believed that you were born with class, walk with it and talk with it, just take it. It's yours and don't let anybody keep you from it. So there is this whole movement of, for me, women who have just inbreeded in me this feeling that I can be and do whatever it is I freaking want to be and do at this moment. And I can change it if I need to flip the script.
Yes.
And that's okay. That's okay. We have such a rich heritage. We come from ancestors who survived and are still surviving today because they didn't have a choice in the matter. And no matter what you try not to teach our children, we will continue to teach our children because critical race theory is real. I mean, we can pretend that it doesn't matter what we went through to get here, but it does matter. And the fact that we are resilient and we are strong and that you cannot keep us down tells me that I raised children who couldn't be kept down. But this is children that I had to explain to at 5 how to talk to an officer to keep them alive. You can't come out of that experience and not be strong and not be special. So for me, there are many to come and many that have passed that have taught me to be and to say and to do. And I will continue to lift them up because each one reach one, each one teach one. It does take a village. And I keep adding people to my tribe.
Yes. Ooh, I got chills. I felt like I was in church. I couldn't.
Okay,
I had to stop myself from amening and all the things. Yes. Attorney Simmons, what about you? Who inspired you?
Well, I mean, I think at the core of Afrofuturism, which at least the part that I think that I've got some understanding of, I think that fundamentally freedom flows. That's the constant. That's what can't change. That's what's growing. That's what's consistently expanding. And so, as a child of the '90s, the truth of the matter is, if you're asking about the examples, I mean, of course, for me, it's always going to be Johnny Cochran. My first not guilty verdict, I borrowed the line. People tell me we had that conversation. I don't think that was you, but somebody. But basically, the line was, he didn't commit, you must acquit. I had to switch it up a bit. But I ran that line past a lot of people, right? Family, friends, or whatever. And all of them said, you're not going to do it. You don't have the cojones. You're not going to stand it, right? That it spoke to a certain fear of, you're going to make it. And I said, never question greatness. If it worked for him, I don't see why it couldn't work for me. And so a lot of times you got to have people with the cojones to really just get in there and to do those things. And so we worked, and I think that, that's a memory I keep because it's the first not guilty verdict I had. But as a child of the '90s, I'll say a guy like Deion Sanders was a huge thing, and feeling in him and having him validate how we felt about him when we were children. Now, when I see him go to Jackson State now and actually recruit the #1 college cornerback in the nation, right? Because it's a big deal. I know it may be, I don't know if y'all are football fans, but it's a huge deal for Deion Sanders to be coaching at a Black college at Jackson State and to be recruiting players that would always go to a University of Alabama or to an Ohio State or something like that. But he actually went there, and he's going to be growing those colleges. And you just watch how Deion Sanders is going to come under attack because he's challenging a lot of money, okay, challenging big college football. and being able to maybe bring some of that back home to those black colleges. So I say a guy like Deion Sanders, but back in the 90s, he was a guy who would strut. He would dance in the end zone. He'd do all those things. Again, freedom. Some more people I would think about would be, quite frankly, when you first said it, my general instinct was some groups out of Atlanta, Organized Noise. I'm talking about Outkast, and I'm talking about old. I'm talking about 93 to 96. I don't really get into the Andre 3000 too much. I'm not hating on him. Do your thing. But that music, Goody Mob, Lucille Green, I'm talking about way back from like, these are people who, again, at the time were somewhat radical. Okay. But I put their music on par with old Negro spirituals, if you really go back and listen to it now within the context of what they did. And so now here we are, you fast forward almost 25, 30 years later, and, and they're doing the Super Bowl halftimes now, whatever. But at the end of the day, what did they do? They had the courage to be free. Because you can get free, but then it takes courage to walk into that store with that guy that doesn't want you free and say, you need to serve me. It's easy to, getting free is not easy, but you have to be willing to walk freely. And so those are some people I would say. I would say, a lot of those folks, I'm not a huge fan of anybody that's going to be doing the Super Bowl halftime this next month. But I'll just say, though, we grew up listening to their music. And again, it was about freedom, them being able to be themselves and not kowtow around, as long as, again, you're not being deleterious to the overall agenda, which should be freedom for all.
Right. That's a perfect roundabout to the landscape of your career. You go into the courtroom, you take an oath, right? You take an oath. Lawyers take oaths when they go in. Okay. Just making sure I'm on the right track here. It's been a while. You go into the courtroom, you take that oath, and it's important. Like, you chose to understand a constitution that at one point was not written with you in mind. We all not everyone, right? But some of us put our hands over our hearts and say the Pledge of Allegiance and engage in this democracy, this system that once considered Black people less a fraction of a human being. And so that's why Afrofuturist principles are so important to bring up. But before we get further into this conversation, I want to shout out our sponsors who contacted Black Freedom Factory, signed on to Black Freedom Factory's vision and mission for Afrofuturist communities, and said, let us sponsor this event. Let us help you cultivate these conversations in community and empower Black youth and bring together Black professionals. Thank you to DreamWeek San Antonio, first of all, for this vision and empowering and inspiring conversations like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. innovated at his time and continued to do. Thank you for Planned Parenthood South Texas for sponsoring this event. We look forward to having you in person in April. Thank you to Theology for helping us with this production. Look at this production. Who knew Pastor Gavin Rogers was a producer? Like, the man wears several hats. Thank you to Hopscotch Museum, who made sure that we were taken care of tonight with lovely beverages. Thank you to everybody, our supporters. Thank you to everybody watching. Thank you to community and volunteers who roll up and support Black Freedom Factory when there is a Haitian migrant crisis in Del Rio, or there is a winter storm and the power grid fails us in the state of Texas, or the power grid is failed by certain people. I won't get into that. Controversial. We're on air. But thank you so much for your support, community. And thank you to our sponsors. I really, really appreciate it. Planned Parenthood South Texas equips Black Freedom Factory with menstrual packs to give out to our unhoused community weekly, as well as a plethora of resources. So I cannot thank them for that enough. Since Councilman Jalen McKee Rodriguez won't be joining us tonight, I will cut this conversation short. We will end at 8:30. But before we do, I want to just leave the air open for some conversation commentary. I took some mental notes on some of the things that you all were saying. And I just want to ask, how do you feel reflecting? I know that the primary elections are approaching, and Black Voters Matter, which is also a national partner of ours that we're really proud of standing next to and registering people to vote. Why is it important that San Antonio get to the ballot or cast in their ballots and show up at the polls and make sure that our community is represented not only on the dais, but nationally in our courtrooms, everywhere that people need representation? Why do Black voters matter in the city of San Antonio?
So we live in Texas. Okay. Let's start there. All right. And the folks in control or trying to control will do everything possible to keep us from voting because our votes scare them, and they should.
Mm.
And to me, that's what's really important. When your vote is so important that they will make major attempts at legislation to keep you from voting, know how important your vote is. You know, we can talk about all the things that keep us from voting, but to me, it is our responsibility to see that we are represented and to see the folks who speak for us and represent us are the folks we want up there. You know, the thing I have noticed, you know, being from the East Coast, you know, I bring that mentality and I look at it and say, okay, so why are they so scared? Because we have an opportunity to make them scared. And we should never take that power for granted. The harder they fight, the more powerful we become.
Mm.
And we are seeing it. We are seeing it all over the United States because all of a sudden our votes become crucially important and they matter. And we know we've seen what happened in Georgia, and we know that we can mobilize young people to register to vote at 18 and to get to the polls and to make conscious change. Because the folks that don't want to change, they come to the polls. So we have to come out just as strong.
100,000,000,000%. Pastor Naomi, when you said that, I thought about the John Lewis Act, and you're absolutely right. Like, they're afraid for us to be able to mail in ballots because that means that a barrier of our accessing that barrier, right? For folk who are disabled who cannot make it to the poll, for single parents who cannot make it to the poll, for people who work 9 to 5s and just won't make that threshold, can't make it to the polls. That threatens this democracy, and it shouldn't, because it should be for the people. So yes, absolutely. Attorney Simmons, weighing in, why do Black voters matter?
Why do Black voters matter?
Well, I mean, Black voters matter because votes matter. And I would also say that the organization of those votes matters as well because they're well organized in other areas as relate in other demographic areas. So it's another one of those freedom things where I don't know. My mom was raised by a very strong woman, and I was raised to believe that if you don't get to tell me I can't do it when you do it every day, it's really that simple. Okay, so as some things are maybe restricted, we also have to pay attention. I always recall, and I read the entire text of that voter bill. I always found it interesting that you have the voter ID bill. I'm not casting any opinions on that, but you would need a driver's license to vote. But if you didn't have that, but you could vote with your gun license. Your gun license doesn't have a photo. See, these are the things that people that sometimes people miss, and kind of the things that we see to it. But as it relates to the votes, I'll just say so that's why the votes matter. But I'll tell you this, your local elections matter a lot too. A lot of people, anytime the conversation around voting comes up, I'm not minimizing anything at the federal level, okay? But I tend to tell people, I think, turn CNN off, turn it up and get focused on what's going on, kind of locally, and work from the inside out. Because I'll give you an example. I had a buddy of mine, it happens when you're an attorney. They'll call you sometimes and they'll say, hey, need help with this. But they wanted to go, Stacey Abrams, great woman, okay? She was here, I believe, a couple of months ago, had an event over at the Tobin Center, raised a lot of money for something, and there's nothing wrong with that. Had a great book tour, but they wanted to spend all this money on all of these tickets to go to her show, and that's what it was. And to get the book signed, and so on and so forth. And they said, did I want to go? I said no, and I said, you know what? There's 3 Black judges right here in San Antonio that could greatly benefit from a contribution on that level that y'all are about to go take over to Stacey Abrams. And they all got stuff, including my mother. You know, she wanted to, they want to go blah, blah, blah. But they went. It was nice. They took pictures with Stacey Abrams. Let's fast forward 3 months later. Somebody calls me, one of the people who went and spending thousands of dollars for Stacey Abrams to go to her book signing. And they've got an issue, and they're like, yeah, so do you know anybody where we can help with this? You know what I mean? Or maybe a court or something, because I'm trying to get this. I said, well, I'll tell you what you could do. Call Stacey Abrams. I'm sure she could help you out. So I can see the pastor understands. There's local officials that we need to support, folks. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay, Attorney Simmons.
Nothing against Stacey Abrams, but yeah. So you want to work from the inside out based on where you live. That's usually the best way you want to do it.
To quote, oh, I'm sorry.
No, you also want to make sure who you're sending to DC. All right. So if you don't vote in that local election, the person that's voting in DC may not be the one you want talking for you. Okay. So we got to start at this level. This is where we need to start. We need to see, who is my city council person? Is it someone who has the same value system I do? Are their staff diversified, or does their staff look just like them?
Are they responsive? That's huge.
Yeah.
Responsive. If District 2, we talk about District 2, and I know it's disappointing he wasn't there today, but I'll give him credit with Councilman Lakeith Rodriguez. And that's not trying to cast any aspersions against anybody else, but District 2 knows what it is to have council people who won't respond at all to anything. There's no way for me to parse that. And then you actually have somebody like Jalen come in and be responsive and see the impact that can have. So responsiveness is another big thing. I mean, an easy way to tell if they care is to call the office and see if you get called back.
That's right.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. I don't think I can call Stacey Abrams and anticipate a call back. But that's because I'm here and she's there. That's my point I'm getting. That's the only thing I'm trying to draw here. It's that start with your local officials.
I have to call Stacey Abrams myself. I don't know. I'm just kidding. I don't know what that looks like. Get her on this panel with Attorney Simmons so he can eat her up. No,
this is. I could tell. That's why I like this, because I can see everybody's reaction. I could tell by Pastor's reaction. She understood what I meant when I said, call Stacey Abrams. See, I'm sure she'll help you out.
I understand exactly. No, I was
give her $3,000 to go to the Tobin Center and look important.
That's actually period. You do have a point. I was actually going to quote the Combahee River Collective, which I love. And they say in that statement that they reject notions of queenhood or queendom and pedestals. And what they mean by that is putting politicians and elected officials on pedestals, because politicians and elected officials are public servants. Their job is to serve the people. We should not be applauding them for passing a bill or a law or legislation that would benefit the people, because that is rightfully so what they have been elected to do. So I 100% agree, Attorney Simmons, with your sentiment. And I 100% hold true to that. Personally, if you've ever noticed, I stay away from endorsements of political candidates, mostly because I believe personally as a Black woman that it's my duty to be able at any time to hold an elected official accountable for what they have promised to the people, for what they have promised to community. And so I 100% agree with your sentiment. I see your face. You're like, ooh, I taught her well. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
I'm going to take it even further. We have some mega Black pastors that we can also say, is that where my money need to go? Okay. And I will call that out.
See, I knew getting you two on a panel. I knew it. Okay, well, yeah, I definitely think that this conversation is fruitful. It looks like Pastor Gavin is itching with a question he has.
Ooh, that's good. I do. I'm gonna switch it over real fast. One of my we were talking about authors and people that influenced. One of the first books I read in seminary was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And I read it in 2007, which was around the time an anniversary version of that book came out. So there was a reflection by Toni Morrison in the end of the book, right? And sometimes you read those either before the book starts or after the book starts. And The Bluest Eye was a meaningful book for me. But I'm going to recap for the listeners what it's about. It was written in 1970. It was Morrison's first book, written from her perspective of Ohio. The novel tells of the tragic story Bacola Breedlove, an African-American girl from an abusive home, 11 years old. She equated beauty and social acceptance with whiteness. She was constantly told that she was ugly due to her mannerisms and dark skin. And as a result, she developed an inferior complex, which fueled her desire for the bluest eyes and to identify as whiteness. Now, it's a powerful book and a tragic book, but a beautiful book. But here is the reflection that Toni said after a generation or maybe a quarter century have gone by. She said, one problem was centering the weight of the novel's inquiry on the so delicate and vulnerable character could smash her and lead readers into the comfort of pitying her rather into an interrogation of themselves for smashing. My solution, break the narrative into parts that had to be reassembled by the reader, seemed to me a good idea, but the execution of which now does not satisfy me. So she's reflecting and she said, besides, because I realized that this book touched a lot of people, but no one was moved. And when I read that, I couldn't understand why she was saying that because, it's such a good and amazing historic novel. So when I reflect on some things and reflect on her, in a way, critique of her own book, in a way, where are we in a society where we're constantly being touched, right? Like we read these things, we hear these stories, we go to the marches, we're touched, right? Uh, and but yet failing to move. And there's a big difference. And obviously, Toni realized that with the reception of her book. So, where do you, panelists, see where we're touched or not moving, and what will get us to move?
So one of my fears for the Black Lives Movement was that it would just last for a season. And I know that the Black Lives Movement has been around for a really long time. It just got a huge spotlight on it. How I look at this is when we think about saying the names of all those young, old, Black bodies that were no longer here, what do we do once the name is said? What we do after we say the name, I think, is what changes, what moves us. So part of the work I do is fighting for the fact that to be a Black trans woman in America is probably one of the most dangerous things you can be. How do I move past the anger and the sadness? And how do I move past creating safety? How do I move past making this something that's more than just upsetting, aggravating, infuriating? How do I stand and scream until everybody stops and screams? So for me, movement is when I stop looking at I'm the one screaming and I'm looking at how do I make you scream? Because the pain I'm feeling, it's still just my pain. If I can get you to see why I hurt, then maybe you will also hurt. And in that pain, healing can begin. So if we're not screaming, if we're just standing by saying it's okay, if we're not making people uncomfortable, then that's, to me, when the real learning and the healing begins. I want you to be damn uncomfortable. Because that's how I grew. I had to become uncomfortable. It became something I could not live with. So that's where movement comes for me, when you can no longer deal with the status quo.
Thank you so much, Pastor Naomi, for that reflection. Attorney Simmons?
I'd say in terms of movement, are we addressing that in terms of progress?
Whatever it means to you, your individual experience.
For me, movement, it starts with it definitely starts with the need for, sometimes people are going to be uncomfortable with things they don't know, but fundamentally, I think, and I truly believe that, for example, a Black trans woman, okay, ultimately wants to live and work and raise families and be happy in spaces where they can be left the hell alone. Let me be me. I'm not trying to be me to bother you. I'm actually not even trying to be me. I'm just being me. I'm done pretending to be something else. Okay. And I think that for me, movement is getting to that place where people can be comfortable in their own skin and be, left alone. We're not there, obviously. Okay. And there's work to be done. But I think fundamentally that's that's how I view progress. And if I put it within the context of Afrofuturism, it's being able to, I look forward to a future when we're done with the Black first thing. And now the person at that company that's the CEO is simply the CEO. Because I know for a fact the persons who I think about, Ursula, I can never recall her last name, but I mean, no disrespect, she was the CEO of UPS, but she made mention of the fact that, ultimately speaking, she was just ready for things. All of the first Black female CEO of a Fortune 500 company, okay, that was distracting from what she was there to do. She was just, she earned the spot, and she accepted the job, and she just wanted to do the job and wasn't really interested in having to deal with the first Black and the first this. So I would hope we get into a generation where people are recognizing that, or let's put it this way, and it goes to what Pastor's saying. I think people need to get uncomfortable with giving gold stars for doing things that should have been done 50 and 60 years ago anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Quit, oh yes, we did this and we've got the first Black CEO, blah, blah. And you know what? It's done. Now go to work. That's when you'll know you're making progress. The reason, and when people want to just cast all of these and just put all these glitter bugs on a lot of things, now mind you, sometimes it is worthy of making those, recognizing those things, okay? But a lot of times, at least me in my life, I mean, I'm not the wisest guy, I guess, but I've noticed on terms how to watch, particularly in the legal community, big firms, and they just want to do this big announcement. This is the first Black, this is the first Black, this is the first. They're making up for something else. Believe me, it's not about, so I think that for me, movement in this space in Afrofuturism is, I would hope that in the future, we're not there, we can get to a place where we're not having a conversation about Black achievement. Because if it's anything Black people have proven, we can achieve.
Absolutely.
And thank you for that response. That means a lot.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Attorney Simmons. This conversation reminds me of a conversation that I had with Robert Salcido, who directs the Pride Center, over the summer. And I asked him, I said, what does the future of the queer community mean to you? What does the future look like? What do you hope to see in the future? And he said that he hopes that his services wouldn't necessarily be needed anymore. that the Pride Center wouldn't have to exist, because we would be accepted. The LGBTQIA plus community would be accepted. And that just reminded me so much of your answer, both of you. So I really 100% agree. I'll also answer Pastor Gavin's question here. Y'all should have seen him itching. If y'all saw my arm like this, it's because we're communicating via smoke signals or something like that. He's across the room. But my answer to that is one of my favorite authors by the name of Cydia Hartman. She wrote a piece that I discovered when I was debating in college. It's a piece called Colored Girls Assembled in a Riotous Manner. And in it, she says that Black feminine rage is incoherent to civil society. And what that means is, you know, as a Black woman, you can literally be sitting in a room and out of everybody be told to smile. You can be assumed to be angry or upset when you're having the best day. You can be assumed to, you know, have an attitude when you're simply just stating your truth. And so this angry Black woman trope that is put on to Black little girls, that's the most disheartening part of the conversation. Is unfair and it's untrue. And I think that the Bluest Eye really highlights Eurocentrism and its effect on Blackness and our interpretation of that as Black people. And I have had a journey with my hair, with my skin, with my body due to white Eurocentric standards of beauty. And so I had to take a couple steps back and read my ancestors and fall in love with my curls all over again and fall in love with what I think a Black executive looks like, or period. Actually, let's, like Attorney Simmons said, let's throw out that Black precursor. What do I think an executive looks like? I think an executive is queer. I think an executive has tattoos. I think an executive has piercings. I think an executive has fun on the weekends. I think an executive gets rest. And I think that an executive serves community and thinks that access to basic resources like housing or healthcare is the future. And it is because I have unlocked that truth that I hopefully can innovate the future of community and Black children. Because although Attorney Simmons' point is valid, we still are within the status quo of Blackness being something that we have to proclaim matters at a rally or a protest when it's just a truth. It's a simple truth. So yeah, I just, oh my gosh, I feel so much closer to you all. If we were in the same room, I would like hug you and like, I don't know, break CDC, like whatever the, you know, CDC regulations. So it's really good that this is virtual. Virtual hugs to you all for your time and your everything. I really appreciate both of you and everything that you do for the San Antonio community. If you do not follow each of these individuals, please do. If you're not engaged with their work, please engage. Attorney Simmons, if you need more interns, I got you. Pastor Naomi, please also explore the Pride Center. The Pride Center is such a valuable resource. I am so happy to have partnered with and identify with that. My partner is a proud board member, and I'm really happy to proclaim that. So yeah, I'm just so happy to share this space with you all. We have 10 minutes left. Pastor Naomi, Attorney Simmons, is there anything that you want to leave the people who are still watching with us? I see those 9 eyeballs in the corner. Is there anything that you want to share with the people watching with us today, Pastor Naomi?
I just think it's so important for us to sleep, eat well, exercise, rest. When we are our best selves, we can change the world. And one of the tricks of the enemy is to wear us down so that we are too weak to fight. And I guess what I have started to learn is balance is a beautiful thing. You know, I can't help, I can't feed you from an empty vessel. So if we do not find the sacred within us, the God of your understanding, whatever you need to give you the ability to move forward, find that peace. Find a space to be who you are and cherish it in all its bumps and lumps and all the things that go along with it. And learn how to love the space that you're in. Because if it does not bring you joy, get rid of it. Life is too short. I am determined that you can mess with my happiness, but you cannot take my joy.
Period. Attorney Simmons.
I'd just like to thank everybody for the conversation. Thank the pastor over. I live downtown, jog downtown. So I'd just like to really just say that we see you at at Travis, at that church, right there at the corner. And y'all are doing great work in the city. And those of us who live in the community who know that community would be a lot worse if it weren't for y'all's efforts. I just want to let y'all know, thank you. To the folks over at the Pride Center as well. They're doing phenomenal work out again, but it's just like anything else. The people doing the real work, the work that's really keeping people safe and really contributed to happier spaces and truly contributing a lot. They don't get a lot of appreciation, but just know, I just want y'all to know that you have mine. Camilla, thank you for this conversation. It's a great conversation. And I would just say to everyone to try to be your best self. We've addressed that. Like I said, we want to get to that place, like we were saying, where we can just be. But I know a lot of self-healing is necessary prior to us to be able to get to that place. And so thank you, Pastor Naomi, for insisting so greatly in that work. Your reputation precedes you. And but I just thank everybody for being here. Send my best wishes. Everybody, please stay safe and stay warm. And thank you, Camilla, for being a positive impact in my life. I know you may think that it's a one-sided thing, but it's not. I can't tell you how much I have been able to grow from our relationship. Matter of fact, I'll tell on myself. You still remember that time we were at, we've got the time at, where were we at? UTSA, and I got out of line. And I want you to know that you bring that to my attention in the way that you did. And what I mean out of line was simply saying something to you along the lines of that, in terms of how things maybe would work in court. It was a mock trial situation, so I don't want to make it, people don't start wondering like it was something, but it was a comment that was made, and she corrected me. And I want you to know that every other lawyer, they still don't agree that I was wrong, but I was. And I want you to know that it's because she's able to express those experiences of Black women in the professional space. And I don't know, you can expand upon that, but I tell you what, if me and you ever wrote a book, we got a good book on that one.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a great story to start with.
Yeah. Okay. I'll close it off with this because that was a good story. So basically, I was a senior in college, and he came to judge a mock trial that I was having in class, and I was lead counsel on that case, and I was losing pretty much. And at one point, he said something along the lines of, fix your attitude, counselor. And so at the end, they took comments, and of course I had my word. And I said, I have to ask, if I was any other race or ethnicity, would I be deemed a pit bull in the courtroom? Or is this subject to my race and being a Black woman? Because I think that's harmful to the stigma of Black female lawyers. And so we had a nice conversation about that. And believe it or not, I don't know if I shared this with you, Attorney Simmons, but after class, a bunch of women came up to me and said, thank you for that comment. So that's what I do. I make people uncomfortable.
And just to be clear, I did not call you a pit bull. It was simply,
I said that myself.
It was kind of like, and it was some expressions like, oh, whatever. Right? It was like, and in court, a judge that, I can tell you this, 99 judges in Texas would have made that comment. They would have said, check your attitude, counselor.
Not to Camilla Factory.
We've dealt with, but the truth of the matter is though, what you were correct about was I should have recognized the totality, in the full context of the situation, and talked to you and said that to you afterwards, or addressed it afterwards. In the moment, because of course, I wasn't singling you out as a Black woman. My mom would kill me. You know my mother well. Okay. All right. I'm not new to it. I'm true to it. Okay. She had me teaching sexual harassment stuff back in the Clarence Thomas days. Okay. So, but at the end of the day, it was just the way you explained it, because it wasn't worth the risk of having you feel that way. And that's what you explained to me, and I'm forever grateful.
And that is a perfect caveat to a juicy closing.
And that's Afrofuturism. Is a
you heard it here
to
first,
evolve
ladies, gentlemen, theys and thems. Attorney Simmons publicly apologized to Camilla Factory. Thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. Black Freedom Factory's Afrofuturism conversation, sponsored by Planned Parenthood South Texas, Pup Theology, Hopscotch Museum, and DreamWeek San Antonio. If you are not plugged into DreamWeek, there are hundreds of events happening over the next couple of weeks to bring in Black History Month with a bang. Thank you, community, for supporting us, sticking with us this long. Stay warm as the temperatures drop, and keep in mind our unhoused neighbors who are seeking shelter tonight at Travis Park Church. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you, Pastor Gavin Rogers, turned producer, for helping me put this on and pull this off. Follow, my voice is giving out loud. It's been 2 hours. No, I'm kidding. Follow Black Freedom Factory on Facebook. Visit our website at blackfreedomfactory.com. Vote in the upcoming elections and every election there is to have in the future. And think about that precursor of Black before executive or fashion designer or whoever the hell you want to be, because you exist. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I really appreciate this conversation. We will see you next time.